Samit, Nitin, Carol, thank you so much for coming for this session. And I have always been curious, Nitin, that someone with such a huge portfolio in one of the largest private sector banks in India, and we have been extremely fond of Ujjivan at Great Place to Work because they have been working on their Great Place to Work journey for 10 years. But I was curious to know what prompted you to look at Ujjivan as as your next sort of big challenge. And is there anything that you knew about this organization? And what would be the top 2 or 3 reasons why you decided to join Ujjivan?
So, the biggest reason, of course, to join Ujjivan was Mr. Ghosh himself, and my first meeting with him, which inspired me to, look at professional life differently. And then during that conversation, I discovered, and of course afterwards, there was a lot of reading that I did, and Mr. Ghosh also helped me with a lot of content, relevant content that I could go through. But the biggest thing that came out was that Ujjivan is a very purpose-driven organization, and all our people in Ujjivan are extremely passionate and committed about just the purpose for which we, have functioned for all these years as a finance company and even now as a bank. There was absolute clarity in terms of what the bank wants to do as a large retail mass market bank, catering to the aspiring middle class, serving the underserved and the unserved. And that really registered very well with me, and I could see myself associating with that. So that was clearly the first reason. The second reason was that the foundation was well in place. The first one being that we had a very and we continue to have a very committed, passionate team, including our leadership team. We have all the technology stack in place. We had the distribution in place. We had the capital in place, even though we were on the way for an IPO. But despite that, we were well capitalized as well. So the bank was also on a very strong footing, on a very strong foundation, which was built over the last 15 years from the time when I joined. The third reason was that there is also a very strong ambition that we aspire to be a large mass market. We want to continue in the unserved and underserved. And from an opportunity point of view, it's a very large space. From our own commitment and determination point of view, it's a very clear charter. And therefore, the ability to, given our ambitions, was also looking like a very clear path that you are coming into an place also has ambition to go and make meaningful impact on more people than what we already deal with. So it is as simple as we want to deal with 10x the number of people customers that we deal with today. And the last one, which was actually the first one, which I said earlier, was Mr. Ghosh himself. So while I knew about Ujjivan, but I must admit I did not know enough about Ujjivan. But I knew enough about Mr. Ghosh, considering that he had also spent some time in HDFC Bank, and he's a legend in HDFC Bank, even though we never crossed our paths in HDFC Bank.
And Samit, coming back to you, I know that you have worked in India, you have worked outside, you have worked for many multinationals. Very few people know that your initial contribution to retail banking in HDFC Bank, for example, you were probably in Muscat, if I'm not mistaken, and then you came to India to start Ujjivan. And that was a huge transformation. And from day one, what was very interesting was to see that you were so focused on not just the business success and the foundation that Nitin talks about, but also how can it be a great place to work for everyone. So help us understand that story and the genesis of Ujjivan a little bit better.
Thanks, Prasanjit. Actually, Ujjivan is my second mountain. I'd worked for 30 years as a banker with some great institutions and some not so great institutions. So there were a lot of learnings from that. And then I felt that, as Nitin talked about, that I should really build an organization which is driven by a purpose, and purpose which is sort of close to my heart. That is to provide financial inclusion to the vast numbers of people in India who were financially excluded. So that was the matter of the heart, but there was also a professional challenge that I would be able to bring in all the experience I had gained over 30 years and use that experience to, successfully launch Ujjivan, especially from the perspective of technology, because there was always, people always said we could not serve the people who are poor because it was not a viable proposition. And I wanted to prove that it could be done in a viable manner. But along with that, when we built Ujjivan, we felt that we should take in all what is the positive things which we have from various organizations and discard the negative. And one of the positive things which I was felt strongly about is that Ujjivan should be serve multiple stakeholders, not just one stakeholder, which is a shareholder, but multiple stakeholders in which obviously the customer is very important, the employees are very important, the shareholders are obviously very important, the community you work in is very important, the regulators are very important. So that we should be the best for all of them, And having worked so many years in various institutions, a lot of people pay lip service to being a good organization for the people, but they are not. I mean, when you come down to the core, you don't find that they're that genuine, So, in the sense that we firmly believe that the employees are as important a stakeholder to us as a customer or a shareholder, So that and in your entire policy, culture, everything you build around an organization, then you work on that basis. So that was very important for us. But we had a challenge at that time is that, when we started in 2005, there were a lot of startups, a lot of IT companies, and, very difficult to get hold of good HR people, So we then said, why don't we sort of try and benchmark ourselves against the best in the industry, And that's how we sort of got into Great Place to Work. It was more to learn and not to be, we never dreamt that we would be one of the top institutions in a Great Place to Work. It was more to learn from other institutions which were a great place to work. And also, the Great Place to Work has a matrix. It has a discipline. So you actually measure yourself against that discipline. So it's not just a matter of sort of saying that, we'll be a great place to work, etc., and culture, etc., which are very important. But the matrix which is there and which you look at it year on year and you monitor yourself on that was also very, very important for us.
It was fascinating for us to see that a microfinance organization serving the poorest of people not only build a very robust and strong business, but actually is ahead of so many others and so many multinationals in financial services who presumably have a far higher capacity to pay. And that is when we realize that the value of purpose and how having your talent pool, which is aligned with your business model, and why not everybody needs to go to Ivy League institutes, and how people from humble backgrounds can actually create great institutions and great organizations. And question that I wanted to ask you, Carol, is that through the last decade or more, uh, microfinance has gone through ups and downs, and we know how difficult things could be. And I remember at least 2 or 3 instances when many organizations were close to probably either closing down or being acquired. What were those challenging moments? And if you look at your 10-year plus journey as a great place to work, were there any turning points where things became very difficult? And what did you do in those turning points? And are there any lessons?
Prasenjit, firstly, thank you for giving us a platform where we can assess the satisfaction levels of our employees. Like Mr. Ghosh said, it is not just for the rank purpose, but also to assess the levels of satisfaction in various phases of our journey in Ujjivan. Um, some of the things that we do as an organization is that we treat our people with respect. We involve our people in all that we do, and we treat them as equals. Now, some of the defining moments where these came into play was first during our microfinance crisis in 2010-11. That was a time where there was a lot of happenings in the industry, and there was a lot of things that was going around about microfinance. But we stayed put. There were clear directions, instructions given to us, and that is what we followed. Those were very simple. First is to take care of our employees, and the simple task that we did there is to ensure that our staff salaries were paid on time. Secondly, we ensured that our repayments to the financial institutions and banks were paid on time. The most important thing that we also did was ensure that our customers would be given loans on a timely basis. And we also ensure that our repayments to landlords and their rentals were also paid. That was one clear thing that we did. The second was a very clear communication right from the top. Mr. Ghosh sent out a personal letter to all employees across the organization, giving them a very clear understanding of the situation that we are in and our roadmap.
But Samit, question that I want to ask you before moving to Nitin, what was the challenge that you were facing in that transition from microfinance company to a full-fledged bank? And your shoes are difficult shoes to fit into. And therefore, what was the criteria that you had in your mind? And how did you finally shake hands with Nitin?
The biggest challenge was really that we believed that our customers were microfinance customers who were not did not have access to financial services earlier and who were not treated well when they went to a regular bank would continue to be our customers, in the bank itself, and they would be treated just like any other customer. In fact, even better because they have been with us for so many years. So to carry our customers and not create a two-tier kind of banking system where, now we will sort of, since we have become a bank, we'll focus more on the affluent and middle class because that's where the bucks are, and forget all the microfinance customers, and we'll continue to treat them, but in a somewhat separate manner. So to create a two-tier system, we were dead against that, and that we would treat all our customers the same way. So that's a big challenge. And there was a lot of debate, and branches will get overcrowded, and people won't like it. All kinds of tamasha. And similarly, what Carol said, all our staff who came from microfinance, a bulk of them were actually class 10, 12, and suddenly they become bankers, I mean, they said, oh my God, we have to sit for an exam and pass an exam to become a banker, etc. We said, no, nothing. We will take you through training. You will have to make an effort to upgrade your, skills, and you are a banker, So that I think that is a tremendous challenge to take that team, and bring them up. And of course, at that same time, we were recruiting a lot of professional bankers because those skills which we didn't have within the organization. And how do you sort of put them together? So we actually started over a year ago. We formed a committee from the board, and one of the things, I mean, the most important thing which we were looking for is a person who's a good leader. That is very important. So that was important. And then our second thing was, obviously we saw that the direction which the bank is going to move is towards a digital, the digital side. So if someone came a good leader, which is the primary consideration, along with a digital background and the strength to take us in that journey, that was what those were basically two things we were looking for, And obviously, the person who would join, we had to make sure that he bought into our purpose. From those three aspects, those were the three criteria actually. Good leader, strong digital background who can take us on that journey, and who buys into the purpose of the organization. That was those were the three, and from that perspective, all of us were unanimous that Nitin was the best candidate. But RBI, requires that we have to supply 3 names and all that. So all that took a little time.
The last question very quickly to all three of you. The last 10 years, and for you, Nitin, your career even before Ujjivan, what would be the top 2 or 3 leadership lessons that you have, particularly when you look at Ujjivan? What would be those 1 or 2 leadership insights that you want to briefly articulate? Samit, would you like to take that question, and then I'll go to the others?
So, from my perspective, I think, as I was mentioning, this was my second mountain. And I think it's very important for every individual or every leader to find out what is their calling, what really, I mean, what makes their heart, get warm and, fuzzy and, they feel good. So I think to get, to merge your calling with your career at some stage in life is very, very important, And I think I was able to do that with Ujjivan. That itself, the whole purpose and everything, that is what drove me actually. So for all leaders, I would say that, just try to find what is your calling, what really gives you real happiness, and then try to merge that with your career, that to me is the most important.
Thank you, Samit. Carol, you would like to summarize your key leadership take?
One of the biggest leadership lessons that I have learned is to have a long-term perspective. That is, there will be a lot of ups and downs that comes along the way, but we should have a very clear understanding of the roadmap, and that also translates into involving people, communicating to people, listening to our employees, and giving them the chance to voice out their opinions so that there is a wholesomeness to it, and we are able to take the organization forward in our journey.
Nitin, the last 50 days have challenged our leadership paradigms and mindsets like nothing before in the 5 decades or so. So, what would be those one or two leadership learning that you would like to share with us as we end this conversation?
See, I think a time like this can neither bring out the best or it can bring out the worst. Okay, we are seeing that happen all across. But staying on course with your what the leader itself is or herself or himself or herself is inspired with, I think that helps. So if the inspiration levels or the reason for the leader to stay inspired change, with the changing context, leadership styles will change. Okay, that should not ever happen. Now, when that is very clear, the next level for any leader is to be able to inspire teams, because leaders can't be seen as either backseat drivers or front seat drivers all the time. Sometimes you're front seat driving, sometimes you're backseat driving, but most of the time you're not even driving yourself. But you need to inspire people to drive on their own. So I am a strong believer in inspirational leadership rather than any other form of leadership.
I think the quality of conversation was just great, as is to be only expected. So, Samit, Carol, Nitin, all three of you, thank you so much